Today, Road to GH will reveal over the past several months, Sonny Corinthos has been secretly battling a life-threatening heart condition, an internal war that he has chosen to fight in silence, shielding almost everyone in his life from the truth. Only 3 people, Christina, Jason, and Natalia, are aware of the severity of his condition. Sonny entrusted them not only because of their unwavering loyalty, but also because he knew they would respect his decision to carry this burden quietly, without panic or interference. To the rest of the world, he maintained his usual stoic, powerful facade, determined not to let anyone see his vulnerability, especially in a world where weakness can invite danger. Sonny's silence wasn't driven by pride alone, it was also about control. As someone who has built his life on maintaining power and protecting those he loves, he couldn't risk losing that grip. He carried on with his daily life, making key decisions, protecting his family, and handling threats with the same cold efficiency as always. But beneath that calm exterior, his body was failing him. The chest pains were growing more frequent, the medication more essential. And yet, Sonny pushed forward, fully aware that time was slipping away and that each interaction, each decision, might be his last. One of the most complicated entanglements Sonny had to face during this time was his long-standing custody battle with Ava over their daughter, Avery. Their relationship had been marked by bitterness, legal warfare, and deep personal resentment. Sonny had long believed Ava to be unfit as a mother and had done everything in his power, legally and otherwise, to remove her from Avery's life. To him, Ava represented chaos, manipulation, and danger. He had once viewed her as someone unworthy of redemption, someone he could never trust with their child. But as his health deteriorated, Sonny was forced to reevaluate everything, including his perception of Ava. The cold reality of his condition forced him to look beyond anger and past betrayals. What if he didn't survive the surgery? What if Avery were left with no stable parent to guide and protect her? In those moments of painful introspection, Sonny began to see Ava not as an adversary, but as a mother who loved her daughter, flawed and complicated. Yes, but perhaps stronger than he had allowed himself to admit. That reluctant acknowledgement shifted his approach. The bitter custody battle faded into resolution, not out of forgiveness, but out of necessity. Sonny's decision to end the fight wasn't a sign of weakness, it was an act of strategic surrender. He knew he couldn't control what came next, but he could control who he left behind to care for his daughter. He could ensure that Avery would have stability, even if it had to come from the woman he once despised. He didn't tell Ava about his condition. She didn't know that his sudden change of heart was tied to a ticking clock inside his chest. But Ava noticed the shift. She sensed the tension beneath the calm. Still, she didn't press. For once, she accepted the peace he offered. And in doing so, Sonny created a delicate new balance, one where Ava was no longer just a liability. She became a player in his contingency plan, a woman whose role in Avery's life would become vital if he didn't survive. Ironically, the woman he had once tried to push away might now be the only one capable of holding everything together. That quiet truth lingered in the air, unspoken, as Sonny continued his preparations, tying up loose ends, offering uncharacteristic acts of affection, and managing threats with an intensity sharpened by mortality. In a twist neither of them could have foreseen, Ava Jerome, once reviled, once feared, had now become Sonny's unexpected ally in the face of death. Not by intention, but by necessity. And though he never said it out loud, Sonny Corinthos knew that, in this final fight, survival might not be his alone to win. When the explosion tore through Sonny's penthouse, it wasn't just a physical attack, it was a direct threat to everything he had built and everyone he loved. The calculated nature of the bombing made it clear that this wasn't a random act of violence. Someone had deliberately targeted him in one of the places he felt safest, forcing Sonny to make a swift, strategic decision that would redefine the way he protected himself and those closest to him. Realizing that his life was under immediate threat, Sonny relocated to the former residence of Valentine, a heavily fortified estate surrounded by 12-foot-high walls, state-of-the-art surveillance systems, and a security team trained to anticipate danger before it even reached the gates. The house, once a symbol of Cassadine power and secrecy, now served as a fortress where Sonny could regroup, strategize, and most importantly, shield his family from further harm. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about outmaneuvering an enemy who had already made the first move. Inside the compound's walls, Sonny's world began to shift in subtle but significant ways. The trauma of the explosion and the looming specter of his declining heart condition prompted him to reflect on the people in his life who truly mattered. For a man so often defined by his strength and silence, Sonny began expressing himself with a raw vulnerability that surprised even those closest to him. He didn't say outright that he feared the end was near, but his actions spoke volumes. He reached out to loved ones with more warmth, more presence, more intentionality. It was as if every conversation, every gesture, was a potential goodbye cloaked in normalcy. Among those Sonny began to care for more attentively was Gio, the talented young violinist he had always supported from afar. Although Sonny didn't yet know the truth that Gio was, in fact, his biological nephew, he had always treated the boy like family. Attending his concerts, covering his tuition fees, and offering subtle but impactful words of encouragement had become routine. But after the bombing, Sonny's involvement took on a deeper, more urgent tone. He quietly handed Gio a thick envelope filled with cash, no explanations, just a quiet assurance that it was there for whatever he needed. It wasn't charity. It was legacy. Behind the scenes, Sonny also began pulling strings to ensure that Joe's career would continue to flourish no matter what happened to him. He contacted influential patrons of the arts, secured performance opportunities, and even made arrangements with his own legal and financial advisors to create a safety net for the boy. No detail was overlooked. He didn't tell Gio the full reason behind his sudden generosity, but it was clear Sonny was preparing for a future in which he might no longer be around to play the role of silent benefactor. In the chaos left behind by the explosion, Sonny's instinct was not only to defend, but to provide, to protect in the most enduring way possible. By moving into Valentine's heavily guarded home, he wasn't retreating. He was recalibrating, ensuring that his next moves would be deliberate, precise, and effective. And while the search for the person behind the attack consumed much of his focus, Sonny never lost sight of the personal side of the battle, the emotional debts he needed to repay, the love he needed to show, and the future he needed to secure for the next generation, even if he wasn't around to see it unfold. In those quiet, calculated days behind the gates, Sonny Corinthos wasn't just a man preparing for a fight. He was a father, an uncle, and a friend preparing to leave behind a legacy built not just on power, but on love, loyalty, and sacrifice. Ava had endured months of emotional and financial devastation at the hands of Sonny Corinthos. Their brutal legal battle over custody of their daughter, Avery, had left her drained in every possible way. Courtroom appearances, relentless legal fees, and Sonny's aggressive tactics had stripped Ava not only of her financial stability, but of her sense of control and dignity. She had been vilified publicly, belittled privately, and painted as a mother unworthy of raising her own child. Every day of the custody war had chipped away at her strength, and though the conflict had recently come to a fragile truce, the wounds it left behind were still fresh and bleeding. But everything changed in a single, breathless moment. Ava had returned to Sonny's residence for a brief, routine exchange involving Avery, just another small, tense encounter in their long string of obligatory interactions. She hadn't expected anything unusual. But as she entered the room, her eyes locked onto a sight that sent a jolt of shock through her entire body. Sonny collapsed on the floor, unmoving. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, and his eyes flickered with a dangerous dimness. A small bottle of heart medication lay just out of reach, as if in his final moments of clarity, he had tried to save himself and failed. In that split second, time seemed to freeze. Ava stood there, paralyzed not with fear, but with something far more complex. She wasn't just witnessing a medical emergency, she was staring directly into the face of a moral crossroads. The man on the floor had once tried to destroy her. He had humiliated her, drained her of resources, painted her as a villain in her own daughter's life. Part of her had fantasized about seeing him fall, about watching the mighty Sonny Corinthos brought low by fate itself. And now, fate had delivered that very image to her on a silver platter. She could have walked away. No one would have known. It would have been so easy, so clean. A delay in calling for help, a simple moment of hesitation, and Sonny might be gone forever. Without him, Ava could very well gain full custody of Avery. She could finally be free of the oppressive presence that had loomed over her for so long. She could rebuild her life on her terms, without the constant fear of Sonny's interference or the shadow of his judgment. The opportunity was there. All she had to do was nothing. But Ava Jerome had always been a survivor, not a fool. Within moments, her calculating mind took over. Letting Sonny die might simplify some things, but it would also open up a whole new world of chaos. The legal scrutiny, the media storm, the emotional trauma for Avery, it would all come crashing down. And more than that, Ava realized something even more powerful. If she saved him, Sonny would owe her. Not just in passing, not in the vague way of co-parents attempting civility, but truly, profoundly. He would owe her his life. That kind of leverage, in the hands of someone like Ava, was priceless. With Sonny alive, she could negotiate from a place of power. She could ensure a more balanced co-parenting arrangement. She could potentially secure financial support that had long been withheld or manipulated. She could show Avery that she had done the right thing, had protected her father when he needed it most. And deep beneath all those layers of strategy, Ava couldn't entirely ignore one final truth. Avery still needed her father. Despite everything, despite all the pain Sonny had caused her, she knew what it would do to their daughter to lose him. And that mattered more than pride, more than vengeance. So Ava acted. She rushed to his side, grabbed the medication, and administered it with trembling but steady hands. She called for help. She stayed with him, watched him stabilize, and quietly marked the moment in her mind, not as a gesture of forgiveness, but as a turning point. From that moment forward, everything between them would shift. She was no longer the powerless one in their dynamic. She was the woman who saved Sonny Corinthos. And Sonny, who had spent so long trying to erase her from his world, would now have to live with the knowledge that his life continued only because she allowed it. It wasn't mercy. It was strategy. And Ava played it flawlessly. That fateful moment, Sonny collapsed on the floor, powerless and gasping for life, was more than just a medical emergency. It marked a definitive turning point, not only for Sonny himself, but for the precarious power dynamic that had long existed between him and Ava. In those fleeting, high-stakes seconds, everything changed. For Sonny, it was a moment of sheer vulnerability, a stark reminder that no amount of wealth, power, or intimidation could shield him from his own mortality. But for Ava, it was something entirely different. It was a silent, seismic victory, a shift in control that no court ruling or custody agreement could ever achieve. As she knelt beside him, her expression was unreadable, a mask of cold calculation laced with the faintest trace of something more human. Not affection, not love, but perhaps a flicker of recognition, an acknowledgement of the complicated history they shared and the messy, intertwined lives they continued to live. Her hands moved with precision, giving him the medication he so desperately needed, yet her mind was already working 3 steps ahead. Saving Sonny was not an act of compassion, it was a calculated investment, a decisive move in a game that had long been rigged against her. For so long, Ava had lived in Sonny's shadow, bullied by his influence, cornered by his legal firepower, and constantly fighting to be heard, to be seen, to be taken seriously as a mother and as a woman. Sonny had tried to erase her, diminish her, reduce her to nothing more than a threat to be neutralized. But now, the tables had turned. The man who had once dismissed her as dangerous, unstable, and unworthy was now quite literally at her mercy. And she had saved him. That truth hung in the air like smoke. Thick, undeniable, and impossible to ignore. In that moment, Ava gained something far more potent than public vindication or a favorable court ruling. She gained leverage, the kind that seeps into the cracks of a relationship and reshapes it from within. Sonny's survival now carried her fingerprint. Every breath he took going forward would be, in some small but significant way, tied to her. And whether he admitted it or not, he would remember that. Ava knew the value of that debt. She could see it clearly, like a chessboard in her mind where a single piece had just been captured, changing the entire game. This wasn't about revenge, not entirely. Nor was it about redemption. It was about power. Real power. The kind Sonny Corinthos had wielded effortlessly for years, but now found slipping through his fingers as he lay helpless on the ground. Ava had seized that power without firing a shot, without raising her voice, and without leaving a trace. It was power born not from violence, but from precision. From patience. From seeing the exact moment to strike, not to kill, but to save. Because in saving him, she owned a part of him. A part no one else could ever claim. And the most terrifying truth of all, what made this moment so profound and so dangerous, was that Ava knew it. She knew exactly what she had done. She knew the weight of the choice she had made, and the long shadow it would cast over every interaction with Sonny moving forward. In his weakness, she found her strength. In his desperation, she found her clarity. And in that cold, quiet moment when she chose to rescue the man who had once tried to destroy her, Ava Jerome emerged not just as a survivor, but as a master of the long game. She didn't need to remind Sonny of what had happened. She wouldn't need to say a word. He would feel it in the way she looked at him now, with eyes that no longer pleaded, no longer feared, but saw everything. Ava had tasted power, and it had come not through destruction, but through mercy. And mercy, when wielded by someone like her, could be far more terrifying than revenge. Stay tuned for the upcoming chapters, because what's coming next promises to shake the very foundations of every relationship, alliance, and secret in this ever-twisting tale. The events that have unfolded so far have only scratched the surface of a much deeper, more dangerous game that's slowly revealing itself behind the scenes. Ava's quiet yet monumental act of saving Sonny may seem like a singular moment of mercy, but its repercussions will ripple through every corner of their lives, altering loyalties, igniting suspicions, and unlocking long-buried truths. In the episodes to come, new threats will emerge from the shadows just as old enemies resurface with unfinished business. Sonny's weakened condition will not remain hidden for long, and the revelation of his vulnerability could shift the balance of power in Port Charles in unexpected ways. Ava will begin to navigate her new influence, but she'll soon discover that wielding power comes with a cost, and not everyone will be willing to let her rise without resistance. Meanwhile, other characters will be pulled into the storm. Jason may find himself torn between loyalty and duty as Sonny becomes increasingly dependent on him. Christina, with her growing emotional awareness, might be the only one to sense that something much darker is at play. And as for Ava, the very leverage she holds might attract the attention of people far more dangerous than Sonny himself. Behind closed doors, alliances will fracture, secrets will surface, and the line between friend and foe will blur. There will be betrayals born from desperation and sacrifices made in the name of love, power, and survival. The past will come roaring back with a vengeance, and the choices made today will haunt every character tomorrow. So don't miss a single moment. Every scene will matter. Every glance will hold meaning. And every episode will peel back another layer of deception, redemption, and the raw, emotional truth that defines General Hospital. The next chapter is just beginning, and it's going to be unforgettable.